So hi guys, welcome to the Make or Repair Lab. Now, been closed down for a while because I've been reorganising quite a lot, and also it's the middle of summer, loads of other jobs, but most of the stuff is reinstalled. We've got some new shelving here. This is longer than the previous. It used to end about here, and then there was a big enlarger. So these shelves are about 18 inches longer than they used to be. There's 4 of them. That gives me kind of an entire shelf additionally. So much of the stuff on here is the same. We've still got the signal generator, the frequency counter, there's an arbitrary generator, there's an ambient power meter. This is a new home for my handheld multimeter that I use a lot in the videos. Here we've got my Keysight 5.5 digit, here's my Keithley 6.5 digit. This is my, I say quiet power supply. This doesn't have a fan, so I use this a lot in videos so as to not put fan noise in. But it's a switch mode, but it's 35 volt 10 amp, so and dual channel, and that one over there is my quieter power supply. So this has a switch mode first stage, and then it has linear outputs on it, and it's programmable, etc, etc. And up above we've got things like current supplies and scopes and stuff. So this still needs wiring up in terms of remote control, although they're all turned on. They're not all necessarily controllable, and that's raised a bit of an issue because one of the other things I've done is I've swapped my computer. And we've got a Surface Pro here now, instead of the big old-fashioned computer that was a tower system underneath the bench, which used to get in the way of my feet all the time. I've also swapped the monitor. This is a bit smaller, so it sits there clear of the bench, a lot happier, and I've moved a few things around. So my mic system, here's my video system over here, so it's tucked away a little bit better than it used to be. Now, this has raised some issues for me. So one is that some of my stuff, there's a microscope over there, for example, which is 5 volt and 12 volt powered. There's a bunch of stuff that can be powered by USB, and every single one of them has its own adapter. Hundreds of mains cables. There's a mix of GPIB, LAN and RS232 on all of this equipment set. And of course, my Surface Pro supports none of that really, so I needed to think about how I'm going to structure things, and that brings me to this little pile just here. So I'm going to take a look at these 4 things across a few videos, and I'm going to start with this guy here. So this is StarTech Hard to Find Made Easy. This is a 4-port USB to RS232 serial hub, so it takes up 1 USB port and provides 4 RS232s. So this has 2 USB ports on the computer here. So that's sort of all right. And what I've actually got on the side of the computer is a docking station, which gives me 3 USB-Cs and 2 USB-A type ports. So that might sound like it's enough, but with all the equipment above, forget it. Nothing like enough. So I do need to put a additional hub on there. So here we go, here's a USB 3 hub. Now I've gone for a USB 3.0 rather than the 3.1 simply because I don't really need the speed, and this is a fair bit cheaper. I've also got this additional hub here, which is a 6-part USB charger hub, just to power things. So we'll see how that goes. I'm a little concerned about that because it is intended to charge batteries, so I don't really know what the noise level is going to be. This is a powered hub. Again, don't really know what the noise level is going to be from that power supply. This one here is self-powered. We don't need to do anything with that. The other thing that I've got here, VGA to HDMI. A lot of my older gear has VGA output. Now it's 640 by 480 VGA output, and that raises a problem because most of these adapters do not do 640 to 480. I've got one that says it does, and it doesn't work. So I'm going to try this one out and see how that hangs together. So that'll be in a future video. This video, I'm going to focus on this, the USB hub. Okay, let's take a quick look at what came in the box. So this is a startech.com 4-port wall and DIN rail mountable industrial USB to RS232. And so this is a 4-port version of this, and I got it so that it will wall mount because if I just switch displays here, we've got the 4 ports along the top here, and we've got the USB on the bottom, and my intention is actually to put it on the wall about here, and the serial ports will then distribute upwards to all the test gear that's installed. There should still be one spare, and this USB port will then connect up to the hub. The hub is hidden behind here at the moment, and I'm also planning to put a cradle on the wall to wall mount that as well. Let's just switch back and have a quick look at the actual contents then. So there's the device itself. I'm going to plug this in before I take it apart for a change, just so that I can be sure that it's working before I destroy it. We've got the instruction manual. This says very little apart from to install the drivers from the provided CD. Now, since I don't happen to have a USB CD drive, then yeah, that's out of the way. Good. USB cable. I might use that one, I might use a different one. And these are some DIN rail adapters, which I won't be using. So let's just zoom in on this a little bit. So the main reason I got this is it's in a steel case. It looks pretty industrial. I don't expect to find that much inside though, to be honest. So I imagined that this would be an FTDI interface type thing, or possibly a different make, and a bunch of level translators just to get the right RS232 level on here instead of the logical RS232 level. We don't want 5 volts, we need the actual true RS232, which I can't remember off the top of my head. So apparently, according to this, we've got a chipset which is an FTDI FT2232H, which sort of sounds about right, and we're using the 4-pin version, 4 serial, transmit receives, maximum transfer rate 91.6 kilobits per second, 7A, odd even, mark space none for parity, stop bits 1 or 2, buffer size 4096. Anyway, let's plug it in and just see what happens. I think that's the way forward. So I've got the device manager display up at the moment, and of course there are no COM ports there at all. Now in some ways that does make life a little bit easier for me, and the reason for that is that this is supposed to remember its COM ports. So I've got a USB-A, I'll plug it in here into one of these, thank you very much. Run it around the corner for just a minute and stick it in here. Now this thing has a 5 volt input, but it's optional apparently. It should power from the USB. So there we go, we found something. And good news, we've got other devices USB to serial cable, 4 of. However, we've also got a warning next to each one, which is a bit of a pain. And we'll update driver, search automatically, search for updated on Windows Update, and we'll download. Okay, I bet it's not actually in there at all, but anyway, we'll give it a go. Oh, downloading 1%, this is going to take its time. Okay, and my USB ports are now happy. For some reason it has enumerated them as 3, 4, 5, 6. I could probably change that, I guess. Okay, let's plug something in. So I'm just turning on my programmable DC load at the moment, and we'll plug this into port 1, I think. Yeah, that's right. So we've got something to connect to it. Okay, so I have installed PuTTY, just so I've got some serial capability, and I've set something up called COM3 and 57600 board, and it has made some sort of connection. Nothing appears to be happening on here, but then any little flashes are going to be pretty brief. So I'm assuming that COM3, 4, 5, 6 enumerate to ports 1, 2, 3, 4, I can change those COM numbers using the device manager, I suppose, but I'll wait until I've plugged a couple of other things in, just because some of them will have built-in USB to serial converters, and yeah, they may not stay where they're supposed to be, so yeah, I kind of think I'll do it like that. Let's think of a command. So if I do star IDN question mark, then it should return the internal configuration of the device, and it does. So it says it is a Corad Cal 103 version 1.0, which I think is actually correct because the Tenma load is actually a rebadged device. Now, there we go, so that is the response. Now I've got the manual open behind it as well, so let's try measure something. I'll measure voltage, question mark, and 0.000 volts, which is correct. It's exactly what's showing up on the display above. So I'm pretty happy with that. I can probably go ahead and install the software for that, but that also means that I can probably access this through something like the National Instruments Visa drivers and things like that, or the Keysight instrument drivers and things like that as well, because they will support COM ports, but at least we know that that is on there. Hopefully now it'll pop out. There we go. Excellent. So this is not an FT2232HL, it's an FT4232HL, i.e. a 4-port 232 converter. So that is pretty straightforward. Okay, so I've got the data sheet up quickly. I've actually got the 2232H data sheet rather than the 4232H. It's the same thing except 4 ports instead of 2, and there's obviously an 8-port version as well. So 5th generation USB devices, 480 megabits, so it's a USB 2 high-speed device. And if we have a look at a few of the features, so we've got the entire USB protocol is handled on the chip for you, so if you're planning to do this, yeah, it's a good choice. About 4 or 5, well, maybe a bit more, maybe £6 from somewhere like DigiKey. Independent baud rate generators, so you can have every port completely different rate, and they can run all the way up to 12 megabaud. Now that will be limited, of course, as it says here, by the external level shifter, because this is going to be either a 3.3 or 5 volt device. In fact, I can see on the right hand side it's 3.3 volt but tolerant to 5 volts. So you'd run this at 3.3 volts. That's easy to obtain off your 5 volt USB connection, and in theory you could go up to 12 megabaud per RS232 channel, but in practice you can't, and that's because you will need something like a Max 232 or something like that to translate those 3.3 volt levels into plus minus, well, sort of 3 to 15 volts ish. In practice they're going to be somewhere, it'll be something like that, plus 7, minus 7 or something like that. Anything like that will be valid within the RS232 protocol. Okay, so those are going to limit the speed, and as we saw, I think it was 940k per channel that we could go to, and it's got all of the stuff like the stop bits and the parity and all that sort of stuff, and we've got transfer control for RS485. So I think this, yes, it does. It handles RS232, RS422 and RS485, which also means you can use it for things like parallel ports as well as serial ports. Okay, I'm not going to look at too much else. On here, there's an awful lot of ports, it appears, but don't forget that for any RS232, you've got not to just handle the RS232 data sent and data received, you've got to handle all the handshaking and stuff like that as well if you're going to implement a full interface. And we've got a handy block diagram. So over here we've got the USB side of things, we've got the protocol engine, Interestingly, we've got an EEPROM interface, and we'll see that on the board in a second. And then it breaks out basically into baud rate controllers. We've got 4K transmit buffers, 4K receive buffers, which is why the actual device itself said it had a 4K buffer. So in fact that's 4K per channel, which is quite nice. And yeah, quite nice indeed. Now this isn't as simple to implement as just throwing it on the board and crossing your fingers and hoping for the best. You do need a bit of extra stuff, and there's a load of references in here to things like application notes and things like that to help you do your design. Of course, one of the benefits for going for the FT2232H series is the fact you can use the downloadable driver, and nothing bad is going to happen to you if you do, and you won't have to do Windows certification and all that sort of stuff in order to drive your product. Okay, let's get back. And there's our clock. So here's our USB coming in. There's the pair running over to the IC. This will be pretty much obtainable off the datasheet. All this pin out here, mainly capacitors, a few resistors, but pretty much all capacitors. Not surprising. We've got a 74HCT 595. Okay, so that's a shift register. It seems to have its input coming from the little EEPROM above it, and its outputs seem to be heading down towards the little LEDs. So I think that's the LED pattern generator. And if we have a little look down here, we've got 4 sets of driver chips. These are all going to be identical. ZT3243. So this is essentially just your driver that converts your 3.3 volts into your RS232 levels, and I think there's 3 outputs and 4 input channels on it for the handshaking, etc, etc. And this also does things like some static discharge protection and things like that, up to 15,000 volts. So handy little device. So okay, I've got my USB hub connected up. This is my USB to COM port hub connected up. Now I've also connected a connector to another device as well, so we might see that showing up as well. But anyway, let's have a quick look. So here we go. Here's TGI 3 GHz counter. So that has an internal COM port, so it has a USB connector and it converts it into a COM port. So that's why that's on COM 7. And here we have my USB serial port nicely glued on COM 3 through COM 6. And that is actually quite important to me because I might be plugging in some other COM devices. I just need to stick there, and also there's some other software which it's very important that it actually kind of stays on the same port. So what is that other software? Well, it's the Keithley IO software, if I can just find this stuff. So all really the device manager shows is that our COM ports are in and up and running. Now this is Keithley Connection Expert, and the reason I'm using this instead of National Instruments Visa is because my USB GPI adapter, which is plugged in here, going up, there's some LAN devices, yeah, just here we can see that I have a GPI device which is a Keithley 220 current source. So I do have to run some GPIB. That's the only interface that that device hosts. Then we've got some LAN connections. Those devices aren't turned on at the moment, so we're not going to see those. And then we get all the comms. So here, for example, with its nice snazzy picture, is the RF power meter, which is connected to a COM connection. Now it does have what appears to be a network connection on the back, but it isn't. It's just a TTL level output. If I just right click on that and check the connection status, you should hopefully find it's connected. So to just check that everything's working now, I've got 4 different instruments on this port already. So I've got a signal generator. So here's a QL355 power supply unit, that's programmable power supply. Here is a IRF 2025 signal generator from Marconi. Here's our counter. And up here we've got our programmable load. So we've got plenty on this already. We've used all 4 ports. That might mean I should have bought the 8 port maybe, but it was a bit pricey, and kind of having looked inside, I might well change that and make my own. Okay, so let's actually just run up the interactive I/O. So here it is, and we've got a command queued up, start IDN question mark, which should persuade the device to just send us its identifier. So we click on that, and there we can see Agilent Technologies E4418B, and then various things like serial numbers and stuff. So that port is working absolutely fine. Now, 4 devices, all different speeds, various different handshake protocols and things like that, and they are all supporting perfectly well through this USB to RS232 hub. So I'm really pleased with it. It's worked exceptionally well. It's nice that it doesn't need any additional power. And if I switch back to this camera here, then I have mounted it now behind the monitor on the wall just here. So there it is, tucked away. It's USB. Here's my here's my hub from the computer. Now I do need to wall mount that. I need to make a bracket so I can just mount that on the wall. And we get just one of the USB-A's comes out straight into this, and that works absolutely fine. Perfectly happy with that. And then I can just articulate the monitor back in front of it again. So that's very successful. Jolly happy with it. So that is the StarTech Hard to Find Made Easy 4-port wall and DIN rail mountable industrial USB to RS232 serial hub. I'm not saying you should buy it off Amazon. I'll put an Amazon link in for you. I don't get any money from Amazon anymore. They closed my commission account because I was using Odyssey and Library to publish, and they didn't like the links coming from those 2 sites, so they decided to close the account down. So you make your own mind up what you want to do about that. Anyway, next video I'll look at some of the other things that I'm putting in the lab and see how we get on with them. See you soon. Bye for now.